Every day, season 2 is here now, feeling bad for land being pushed away. Don't throw stones, it hurts the ones you love. Hey, hey. Oh, what pain for Lan to lose his connection to Moiraine and have that heightened by her then pushing him away. Have you ever felt someone you cared for was just pushing you away and you didn't know why? In today's video, we'll examine some of the reasons behind these behaviours that Moiraine displays as she deals with her grief and finds out that Lanfear is walking in the world. I found it therapeutic to dive into the feelings and differences between reacting and responding. I hope you do too. Alright, let's get into it. I'm Koala Sedai and I'm just loving breaking down Season 2 of The Wheel of Time, scene by scene, and sharing it with you. The scene that we're looking through today is from Episode 1 and I've numbered it as Scene 10, but this is a scene that revolves predominantly around Lan and how he's dealing with what's happening at Tiffin's Well. It really encompasses a few scenes that go together, as the show really likes to cut scenes frequently to keep a feeling of lots of action happening. I've not discussed the relationship, or lack thereof, between Lan and Moiraine in Episode 1. Earlier episodes I really concentrated just on what was happening for Moiraine. And, Episode 1 has done a great job of perspective switching. And this makes fantastic watching, but it really complicates breaking things down. So I decided to keep all the Lan and Moiraine interactions to go through together, except for the last one with the Fades, which, obviously that's just an episode all of its own. So all we've seen so far is Moiraine suffering and working out, physically alone, and Lan doing the same. Then Lan brings Baal Doman to Moiraine and she obviously just dismisses him. So we know they're not communicating, but we've really just glimpsed this without getting much clue as to what's actually going on. So I want to start with the discussion among the tomato plants between Lan and Tomas. I love how this scene is used to introduce Tomas to us as someone we can trust, because Lan is talking about how he feels. At the same time, it serves to explain some of what's going on with Lan and Moiraine so that we can all get up to speed. Once again, the show gives us points of view we never got in the books. We really don't get inside Lan's head when we're reading, yet in the show we see so much more depth to him. I know some people feel they have changed Lan, and I don't agree. From Nynaeve's perspective, we know the man is passionate and he's a fucking poet. Robert Jordan, however, never wrote scenes like this where Lan could talk openly about his feelings to other men. I believe one reason for that is connected to the experience of returning from Vietnam and not being able to discuss any of your trauma back in the world. The only place that you could discuss that trauma was with other vets. And usually you're met with some kind of brush-off response or some joking to push it aside. I really noticed how much Tomas feels like what we have seen of the other warders in Season 1. He understands quickly, but he isn't going to get into sticky feelings conversations. He simply calls it as he sees it and tells Lan that if it's tough, he can leave. He has some great insight, but deep discussions? Nope. I squealed right on the first watch of this because I thought, hang on, why is Tomas encouraging Lan to leave Moiraine there with him? It's interesting because we don't get a point of view of Tomas in the books, and we don't even see much of him. We know that he's a dark friend, but we also know that he wants to return to the light. Verin bonds him and at the same time offers him a way to fight against the Dark One from the inside. So, can we trust Show Tomas suggesting Lan leave Moiraine? And will he be there for her, just like he is for Adeleas? I've always wondered, in the books, why Verin took off and left Tomas behind when she went to find Rand in the Great Hunt. I mean, he fights faithfully alongside her, and he even stood guard over Min during the battle near Shadow Logoth. So if you have any deeper insights on Book Tomas and his intentions and all of that situation, I'd really love for you to comment below. But I'm just stuck a little on this very small conversation, and I have to wonder if Tomas will prove to have a slightly different role and be a little darker than in the books. Again, this is what I love the most about the show. We can't rely on what we know from the books to mean that this or that will happen in this or that way in the show. I do like the way Lan described the bond. It was like a friend walking along with us, chatting away so we never had to. I've heard some talk among the fandom that I think is really relevant here too, which is that the show has put across the bond, or the water bond, between Lan and Moiraine as being similar to being parents, to having a child, and having now lost that child. And so Lan says it a bit differently, that it was like a friend walking along with them and chatting. But I think that there is so much more to the grief that they are both feeling in these scenes than sometimes you really pick up unless you stop and think about the depth of what losing that truly means. I mean, it must be so strange for Lan to feel so alone after 20 years of constantly being in full communication with Moiraine. For both Moiraine and Lan, the loss of the bond is truly akin to the loss of a person. I know that there's also some who don't like the way Moiraine and Lan are being portrayed in this season, but I think they're showing the water bond brilliantly by having it gone. What a contrast and what a brilliant way to show it, especially building on what we watched in season 1 when Karenni was killed and Stepan was left alone without his Aes Sedai. They can just show things without having to go into a lot of the deep telling, and it really hits home because they're doing the showing in such deep emotional ways that it really sticks in our heart, and it's things that we're able to remember. Moiraine's distress was evident in the opening scenes. I love the reflection we get by seeing her try to make Lan run away by throwing verbal and emotional stones at him. I mean, we've seen so many others do it, but we thought Moiraine was so much better than this. However, the point is important to make. Having the one power doesn't make a person into some kind of amazingly wonderful or better person. It just makes the person they were someone who can use the one power. So, with the loss of her power, we see Moiraine just as herself, and at the lowest point that she as herself could be as a person who's grieving. In the books, we see Moiraine as being in control and knowing what she's doing for quite a deal longer. But remember, we have to fast track everything here. Moiraine wasn't always in control, and she didn't always know what she was doing. It's important to remember that a television adaptation has to have pacing done in certain ways, or it simply doesn't work on screen. So while this story arc is not in the books, there is a lot of payout that we're going to get in future season that's going to be really important for the entire story arc and for certain character arcs. The one power can be compared to a drug such as heroin. It is highly addictive. Once you've touched the source, you will not be able to refrain from reaching out and touching it again. Once you feel the rush, the way everything is clearer, brighter, you're feeling more alive than ever before, well, the world will never look the same again when you're cut off from it. I think that this has to be held clearly in mind when you watch the entirety of Season 2 and what's happening, both to Moiraine, for Moiraine, and to the people around her and the people that she's interacting with. But wait, there's more. It was Moiraine herself who suggested she be exiled from the One Tower because she had such dedicated purpose. And now she's pretty much exiled as someone who is presumed to be stilled. So she feels that her purpose has been stripped away, as well as her power has been stripped away. So we can't lose sight of the double whammy of her loss. She was so devastated and in shock at the eye of the world that she just watched Rand leave. In future episodes, we find out that she pulled strings to get Logain to Kyrian, and I'll talk more about all of that was going on later, because I'm supposed to be here talking about Lan, not Moiraine, but it's hard to talk about Lan without bringing in all of that's happening to Moiraine, because the two of them are so inextricably linked together. So Lan can't tell what she is feeling, and she's pushing him away constantly. So his greatest fear is that he has to stand between her and the possibility that she'll take her own life. Can you just stop for a moment and sit really still and imagine how traumatic this is for Lan in particular? Lan, who fell asleep, albeit he was drugged, when he was determined to get Stepan through the night, only to wake and discover his body the next morning. Now that is a huge trauma that Lan went through. We mustn't forget that. Imagine how he must feel when he sees Moiraine in brown clothing, carting those buckets, shutting herself away. Honestly, you have to get right into the depth of this and then see how little he actually knows about what is going on for her, and how well he masks the tumultuous anxiety he must be feeling. Right, when he was with Stepan, he thought he understood how Stepan felt, and he thought that he had some great suggestions that were going to help Stepan get through this, only to find out that he didn't truly know the depth of the pain that Stepan was in. So when you take all of that into account and watch the acting here of Lan on screen, that truly is Lan from the books. In a very different situation to what we have seen, but he is being incredibly stoic. He is showing very little of what he feels, and you must remember that he's been here with Moiraine for months and months and months, and what we're seeing is finally when he does start to actually break out and say and show some of the things he's feeling. So we see Lan come into the library and he finds Moiraine standing there with the poem, and he's closed away from her again. Remember, he has no idea what this piece of parchment is that's in Moiraine's hand. He's got no idea if that piece of parchment is just some news from one of her eyes and ears, if it's a letter from somebody, maybe even, one of the other Aes Sedai, or what it is. All he knows is that she's standing there looking solemn, closing herself off from him yet again, and he is beside himself with worry. Just check the posture, the body language acting that the both of them do during this scene. They're acting with every fibre of their bodies, and there are so few words actually said in an entire 2-minute scene, and yet so much is conveyed. I love the way this scene really mirrors the way Rand threw emotional stones at Perrin, Mat and Loial in the Great Hunt in a misguided attempt to protect them from him. It's interesting because one of the things we're really learning this season is that they are vulnerable alone and powerful together. Yet, pushing each other away seems to be a theme for all of our main characters. Now, pushing people away can be done physically by leaving, or by trying to offend the other person so that they will leave, or by simply being totally unavailable when physically present. And so in this episode, we see Moiraine go through and use all three of those strategies. We have this saying in the fandom, communication? Not in my wheel of time. And since season 2 aired, I've thought quite often as I've been going through everything that we've experienced in this season about how realistic miscommunication actually is in our real lives. I mean, I'm going to be honest here. I know that I can be terrible with communication, even though I've worked on this in myself my whole life. Sure, when things are going well, I communicate pretty well. It's when there are important things at stake that my fears and anxieties double-cross me the most. Emotions really have a huge impact on us in all situations. It takes a lot of work to learn how to respond rather than react, to learn how to risk rejection and therefore be open and vulnerable. We get the feeling that Lan has been holding his own feelings close and masking them well. But this time, he loses his cool, slamming his hand on the desk in anger. Naturally, it doesn't resolve a single thing, and Moiraine gives just that kind of response I would expect from her in this situation. She simply locks eyes with him for a little bit, then, instead of replying directly, simply gives him an instruction. And the way she does this though, oof, treating him like nothing more than some hired help. To me, it's obvious that the poem has shaken her to the core, especially since we immediately know what that poem says word for word and what the implications of it are. It gives us a really special way of watching this scene as book readers because, we know the depth of what's going on. We know what's at stake for everybody, for Rand, for Moiraine, for Lan, for Nynaeve. We know what it means that Lanfear is out and walking in the world. Moiraine also knows what it means to have Lanfear out, loose, walking in the world. So the reveal of receiving that poem must have hit her so hard because she left Rand out there alone while she's been hiding away here at Tiffan's Well researching. With what we know about Lanfear, and that Moiraine fully understands that she is the most dangerous person for Rand to be around, suddenly she's terrified for him. Knows that she's still cut off from the One Power, and that makes her even more terrified because not only can she not fight Lanfear, but Lan can't help her either, and he is going to be in even more danger, or at least as much danger as she is. So, big shove, throw some stones, the last being one that is designed to give her enough time to get away unnoticed. She instructed Lan to bring her dinner up, but he says, fuck you, and there you go. She has some getaway space. But she paid for that space. Just watch her face as she turns towards the door when Lan leaves. Oh my God, her eyes. She is just bleeding inside on every level. Yet then, she turns her eyes back to the poem. She's not reading it, she's just turning it over and over in her hands. What Lan doesn't know is that Moiraine has been studying and receiving information from her eyes and ears, but she hasn't figured out exactly what's going on and how it all fits together. She didn't know what she should be doing. In the books, while she's staying with Vandene and Adeleas, she's doing much the same. She's trying to piece together scattered bits of information to form a picture that makes sense. Now she knows. And she has got to move right now and take action. Or at least that's how she sees it. The biggest difference here is that she isn't sharing any of this with Lan, hasn't been sharing it with him for months. He doesn't know if she's in total despair or discovering groundbreaking information. The stone hits him, he leaves with those cutting words that she can make her own dinner. He doesn't even mean them at all. As we see, he has a meal ready for her later. He's just reacting. She's hurt him yet again, and most of the time he has squared his jaw and just taken it. This time he lashes out a little, never suspecting, with no bond, that she has made a huge decision, and she takes off. At dinner, Lan is obviously feeling awful for reacting back at Moiraine, and he's trying to convince himself that she will come down to dinner. Have you ever done that? Have you ever really known that you've done things wrong, that there's repercussions to it, and yet tried to just hold on to a bit of denial for a little while, really hoping that if you hold hard enough onto that denial that actually it'll all come true? It's not a smart way to do things, but I think if we're honest, we've all done that at times in our life. Adeleas, I love this conversation from her because she hits the nail on the head and yet she misses it completely, all at the same time. She says, Lan, you're taking this all too personally. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. So, she's right. Moiraine is dealing with her own shit and is about having lost both the things that meant the most to her. She lost the One Power and she lost her mission to guide the Dragon Reborn because Rand's gone. However, she misses the point completely because it is personal, deeply personal. Moiraine doesn't feel she'll be able to deal with this becoming a trifecta by watching Lan die trying to protect her when they're not linked to each other. She knows that Lan is so much more vulnerable without the water bond in so many ways. So there is a very personal side to this, and it's all the more obvious by how much effort she is putting into pushing him away. I love the advice Lan's given in this scene because I do feel it's the same thing. It's a fantastic mix of excellent advice in general, but again, missing the point entirely. This is almost like a twist on the kind of communication issues we're used to in the books. Verin, Adeleas and Tomas all try to show they understand and offer advice. And do you know what? They mean well. They all truly care. But in the end, they all basically say, look mate, give a space, step back, it's not your problem. Meanwhile, Moiraine is literally taking off on a wild mission that would have certainly led to her death had Lan not ignored them all. Okay, to be fair, Verin and Tomas do come and save the day too, but that's another breakdown to get to, and they did that because Lan discovered Moiraine was gone and Lan took off in a rush. There we go. So, we find Lan and Moiraine in a totally different relationship dynamic than last season. Well, most of last season. Remember, last season did end with Moiraine masking the bond and slipping off without Lan in order to protect him. She was already fearing that her mission would be his death. On top of this, she knew that he was falling in love with Nynaeve and totally approved. Moiraine knows Lan to his core, with or without the bond. Lan is the one who is there doubting if he truly knows Moiraine. In the books, Moiraine was also just as aware, and she was actively making plans to try to ensure Lan would not die, even though she was certain that her path led only to death. It is so hard to watch her treating him this way, but she was also very harsh to him in the books. So, from where I'm watching, it all tracks for Moiraine. Lan opens up to his peer, Tomas, only to be told he can just leave and let Moiraine deal with her own shit. Adeleas and Verin basically think he should just back off and let her deal with it alone. None of them have any idea that Lanfear is free and that Moiraine knows this. Now, that just may have changed a lot of what they were saying. Can you imagine that dinner conversation if it had been about the fact that we've just found out Lanfear has been broken out of the seals and is walking the world? Communication? Just what we expect. Nope, not in this new Wheel of Time either. I do hope you've enjoyed this breakdown on how Lan is dealing with being pushed away by Moiraine. Did I miss anything? I'm sure it's very possible that I did. Is there anything you noticed going on there that harps back to, reflects, or is maybe a flip on something that happened in the books? I'd love to know anything else that you can see in this. I've started getting some really fantastic, quite deep dive comments, and I appreciate them so much. Just so long as you remember, I love this television adaptation of The Wheel of Time, and I want to keep looking at it from that whole perspective of how well are they doing things and how much can we find that they are doing, rather than presuming that they're not trying to do things well at all, because I think that we have no idea how much thought and effort and time has gone into this adaptation. Make sure you also take a moment to like, subscribe, share, comment away, and I'll be back with more as soon as I can. I have to admit, I'm being a bit sporadic in getting these out there. I really want to do one every week, but each episode, it does take a lot of hours for me to create, and so hey, life just keeps happening and getting in the way. So annoying. However, thanks for watching. I appreciate every view, comment, and interaction that I get. Let's enjoy the Wheel of Time as much as we can while we wait for season 3.